friends, I'm Arpit and I'm here with today's analysis. Today is 28th of June and we are going to deal with three very important topics which are in news. The first is Panchsheel. Panchsheel simply stands for five principles. China is celebrating 70 years of Panchsheel as it was signed in the year 1954 between India and China. These five principles are mutual respect for each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty, mutual non aggression, mutual non interference in each other's internal affairs. The fourth is mutual benefit. And the fifth is peaceful coexistence. These five principles were the foreign policy documents formulated by the Chinese, signed by India and China. And these five principles were adopted by the non aligned movement also later on as its core principles. These five principles are a testament to the fact that they are evergreen principles. And with the present day scenario where China has become too aggressive, these principles can definitely play a key role in reducing the tensions between India and China. Next is why India needs to build a disaster resilient infrastructure. Disaster resilience is very much important in the times of increased frequency and intensity of disasters. Whatever infrastructure we are building, whether it be roads or it be buildings or it be electricity transmission, the telecommunication transmission lines, all these should be built in such a way that they become disaster resilient, means they are not impacted due to the disasters happening. Like, for example, cyclones or these gusty winds, or I would say sandstorms, they can destroy the overhead electricity transmission cables or overhead electricity communication lines, which can be done underground. Laying them underground will make them disaster resilient. So, definitely, India needs disaster resilience for its infrastructure. The third topic is related to the second topic, that is Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. This was proposed by India in the year 2019, headquartered in New Delhi. This CDRI is a knowledge hub which provides the best practices which have been adopted globally for making the infrastructure disaster resilient. It is not a funding agency. It is not funding you for creating infrastructure, but it is giving you technical expertise, the knowledge for making your infrastructure disaster resilient. This is one such global organization which has been proposed by India and headquartered in India. And then we come to the MCQs. After that, we come to the MCQs of yesterday. I'll be discussing the answers to that. So let's get started with the first topic, that is Panchsheel. Panchsheel, as the name suggests, stands for five principles. These five principles we will discuss. But yes, why are these in news? These are in news because there have been 70 years since we signed the Panchsheel agreement with China. It was the year 1954 when this agreement was signed. That is the 70th anniversary of the five principles of peaceful coexistence, as China calls it, are being celebrated. And the good thing is that these are being commemorated, or these are being celebrated by the Chinese people. Ceremony in Beijing will be chaired by Prime Minister Li Qiang. President Xi Jinping will deliver the keynote address. And the event has given a forward looking focus. The theme is from five principles of peaceful coexistence to building a community with a shared future for mankind. Now, with the conduction of this kind of event, is China signaling towards a truce? Is China signaling towards peace with India? Or is China signaling towards better relationships with India? Well, let us see. Let the answers to all these questions, let it be left for the time to decide. But yes, as of now, we should know those five principles. Now, this Panchsheel agreement was formally known as the Agreement on Trade and Intercourse with Tibet region. And India signed this agreement. Means India recognized that this Tibet region lies in China, because this agreement, this Panchsheel agreement, which we call it as the Panchsheel agreement, was signed by the ambassador of India to China, and from China's side was the foreign minister of China. So, foreign minister of China talking about Tibet region and talking about increasing trade, intercourse, means religious travels and all with Tibet. That was, you know, testament to the fact that government of India is recognizing Tibet to be part of China. So, the preamble of Panchsheel Treaty laid down five guiding principles. First is mutual respect for each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty. Second is mutual non-aggression. Third is mutual non-interference. Fourth is equality and mutual benefit. And fifth is peaceful coexistence. So these five principles were there, and these five principles very much important. These are in present day scenario also, or these kind of principles are evergreen principles. We will not be doing aggression against each other. Military aggression it is talking about not interfering in each other's internal affairs. It is not it is talking about equality and mutual benefit, means whatever trade we do, whatever relationship will be we will be having, we will our relationship will be mutually benefiting each other. Peaceful coexistence, we will be coexisting peacefully with each other. But this agreement did not become a successful agreement because in 1957, India discovered that China had constructed a road from the Aksai region. Aksai region is a territory which, as per claims, is part of that Jammu and Kashmir region. We were claiming it. And without our information, a road was constructed by the Chinese, and we got to know it about it through satellite images. On the other hand, India in 1959 gave refuge to Dalai Lama, the spiritual leader of Tibet, who ran and came into India. So, Chinese people thought that India is interfering in the internal matters of China, whereas this principle of mutual non interference called for non interference. India thought by constructing that road through the Aksai region, China is not respecting our territorial integrity and sovereignty. That is why this particular treaty was not such a successful treaty. There were violations on both the sides. I'm not going into who violated first, who violated later, but yes, there were violations on both the sides. This resulted into the 1962 war also. But let us stick to the Panchsheel Treaty, the philosophical background of Panchsheel Treaty. So the philosophical background can be traced back to the Panchshila of the Buddhists, the Buddhist concept of Panchshila, which describes the five moral vows of Buddhism. First is abstinence from murder, theft, sexual misconduct, lying, and intoxicants. So these are the five moral vows that any person has to avoid these kind of or indulging in these kind of things. So from these five principles or Panchshila, Panchsheel was inspired. The philosophical background is this. Panchsheel and non-alignment. Non-aligned movement was launched in the 1960s, early 1960s or late 1950s, we can say. The stepping stones, or I would say the foundation stones, were laid in 1955 Bandung Conference. And there a 10-point declaration that co-opted the Panchsheel. Out of these 10 points, 5 points were from the Panchsheel. 1955 it happened. NAM was founded with the signing of Brioni Declaration on July 19, 1956, and three people were there: Nehru, Egypt's President Gamal Abdel Nasser, and Prime Minister Joseph Boros Tito of Yugoslavia. Apart from it, the founding members of NAM are considered to be the President of Indonesia and the President of Ghana. Okay. And Nkrumah was the President of Ghana, and the President of Indonesia was also one of the founding members. So the Brioni Islands are in the northern Adriatic Sea and now are part of Croatia. But anyways, that is a different story. Let us stick to NAM. The first NAM summit, Belgrade, 1961, it happened, accepted Panchsheel as the principal core of the grouping. So Panchsheel became the principal core of this NAM grouping, and NAM adopted this as principal core or core principles in the first meeting of NAM, that is in 1961 in Belgrade. So there was an inherent connection of Panchsheel and NAM. China's foreign policy today is quite aggressive. Whether I talk about being in the South China Sea, it is having an expansionist mindset. It is having problems with a lot of Southeast and East and Southeast nations, East Asia and Southeast Asian nations. Those are lying in the vicinity of the South China Sea. Then China's relationship with the United States has been hostile. They both are considered as rivals, technologically, economically, militarily also, and at times diplomatically also. Then, since 2020, India and China are engaged in bitter border standoff in the Ladakh region. We know that very well. It's been 4 years and counting. Now, China celebrating, commemorating 70 years of Panchsheel. Definitely, Panchsheel holds that potential to resolve the conflicts with other countries, to better the relationship with other countries, with any country or among any country it is applicable, whether it is China, USA, China, India, China, East or South Asian nations, or whether it be India or Pakistan or India or Bangladesh. For any, I would say, two countries, these five principles, if they are followed, relationships will be strengthened. And I hope that these five principles with China are revived. Initially, that agreement was signed for 5 years. That was never revived after 5 years. So this happened, but yes, let's be hopeful now. Now, why? Second topic is why India needs to build disaster resilient infrastructure. Disasters have become more frequent. Disasters have become more intense, and they are not only impacting the lives of the people, but they are also inflicting a lot of or enormous economic losses. They are impacting the infrastructure, and hence it has become important to make the infrastructure disaster resilient because disasters will happen. Most of these are climate induced disasters. A few weeks ago, we saw soaring high temperatures in which electricity supply in Delhi was disrupted. Water supply in Delhi is currently disrupted. And not only in the case of Delhi, it was in the case of many other cities in North India where severe or extremely severe heat waves were happening. A lot of buildings got fired, a lot of fire incidents were there, electricity grids got fired, so electricity transmission was impacted. So all these things happened. The impacted infrastructure. So telecommunications, transportation, health services, cyber systems, electricity transmission, all these kind of, I would say, infrastructure is impacted. And not only this infrastructure is impacted due to heat waves, there are other disasters like suppose cyclone comes. The cyclone can impact the overhead transmission cables, whether it be of telecommunications or whether it be of electricity transmission. It can impact. Then what will you do after the impact? You will spend money. You will put that infrastructure back in place. Additional cost. So beforehand only no, make that infrastructure disaster resilient. Resilient means nothing will happen to that infrastructure even if disaster comes. For example, overhead transmission lines underground, you do it. It has become disaster resilient. In case of floods, in case of heat waves, in case of, I would say, cyclones, anything comes, it will not impact that transmission cables. So these kind of things or these kind of, I would say, upgradations have to be done on the impacted infrastructure. The costs involved in this. See, there are multiple things which we can do for our disaster preparedness. And one of the things which we can do is early warning systems. A disaster is going to come, we predict it. Let's suppose a cyclone is going to come, we predict it. We tell the people, we evacuate the people from there. Lives of people are saved. Early warning systems can do that, but early warning systems cannot stop the disaster. Disasters will happen. In the aftermath of that disaster, the economic costs will be incurred because there will be damage to property, damage to infrastructure that has to be repaired. So, while early warnings and quick response have significantly reduced human casualties in disasters, economic and other losses from extreme weather events and disasters have been rising. And why they have been rising? Because increase in frequency and intensity of such events. Now, the government data shows that from 2018 till 2023, states together in India have spent more than 1.5 lakh crore on dealing with the aftermath of disasters and natural calamities. So, this has to be tackled. And again, to reduce these kind of losses, making disaster resilient infrastructure has become very, very important. Now, the long term costs involved. These are short term costs, but yes, long term costs, livelihood losses are there of the people. That has to be addressed. The 2022 World Bank report projected that decline in productivity due to heat related stress. Because in extreme heat, you cannot work. Physical work, you cannot do. So, in Delhi only this year, it was ordered that between 12 to 3 p.m., 12 noon to 3 p.m., no one will work in outside. No construction workers will work because it can be fatal for them. So productivity loss is there. And it could take away around 34 million jobs in India by 2030. Reduction in fertility of agricultural land are big and projected to worsen over time. So agricultural productivity drops down. Just the food wastage on account of transporting food items in non-air conditioned trucks and containers was already worth about $9 billion annually. And in the event of, extreme weather events, this loss is expected to rise further. The impact of disasters will further worsen the scenario. So, this is bound to happen. Incorporating resilience has thus become very, very important. And we have a few examples like hospitals in disaster prone areas are equipping themselves with backup power supplies. Power supplies should not go in those areas like cyclone prone areas or whatever areas where disasters are happening and they are impacting the power supply. Airports and railways are taking steps to avoid or quickly drain out waterlogging. Telecommunication lines are being taken underground along with electricity transmission lines. So these things are happening. That is how we are making it resilient. And India at the global level has suggested the formation of an organization called as the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. This happened in the year 2019 and this was at the UN Secretary General's Climate Action Summit, which happened in New York in 2019. So, this Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure is a knowledge hub of best practices which have been adopted globally to make infrastructure disaster resilient. It is headquartered in New Delhi and multiple members or multiple countries or multilateral organizations are now members of this organization. The tasks with CDRI are this India-backed CDRI, Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. The World Meteorological Organization announced a 5-year program to establish early warning systems for disaster. So WMO has given a task to CDRI to establish early warning systems in the countries. $3.1 billion is the amount which has to be invested between 2023 and 2027. This early warning systems will definitely reduce the fatality rate and it will also reduce other losses as well. But majorly, the impact of early warning systems is on fatality rate. Now, the above program was announced by UN Secretary General at COP27 in the Sharm el Sheikh in Egypt. Why is early warning system important? Many countries, including India, have established robust disaster management practices that have significantly reduced human casualties in disasters. Human casualties in disasters, how we have reduced? Because we now know why, when a disaster is going to come and we can evacuate people, we can save lives. The economic cost of a disaster remain enormous. See, early warning systems and all cannot stop the disasters. It can give us signals ki bhai, disaster is coming. So you take what best you can, what best measures you can take, evacuate the people, but that disaster will come and do the losses. According to WMO, nearly half of the world's countries are lacking these early warning systems, where if they get installed, they can be they can be very effective. Early warning system saves lives and gives significant economic advantages. For example, a mere 24-hour notice of an upcoming hazardous occurrence can reduce the resulting harm by 30%. Spending roughly $800 million on early warning systems might save up to $3 to $16 billion in damages per year. So, these are the benefits or some estimations which point towards the benefits of early warning systems. The global cooperation under CDRI, it attempts to bring countries together to share and learn from the experiences of one another. That is why I'm telling you that it is a knowledge hub, which is a repository of best practices from the entire globe. It aims to assist member nations in integrating disaster management policies into their activities. CDRI members include not just countries, but UN bodies, financial institutions, group working in disaster management, etc. As of now, it has around 30 plus members. So this is the membership of CDRI. No need to memorize as of now because the membership will increase and it will increase significantly. Now, significance is to identify and promote best practices for disaster management, making infrastructure disaster resilient, to provide access to capacity building, to work towards standardization of designs, processes, and regulations of making infrastructure disaster resilient, to make entire networks resilient, whether it be electricity transmission networks, telecommunication networks. So, the main aim of CDRI is this. a recent study conducted by CDRI in June 2024 only, and this was in Odisha. Now, CDRI found that state's infrastructure was extremely fragile. Now, Odisha lies on the eastern coast of India. This eastern coast of India is prone to cyclones, and with the advent of global warming or climate change, number of cyclones, intensity of cyclones have increased. So this is a big question. So what the study found, let's see. More than 30% of the distribution substations were located within 20 kilometers of the coastline. 20 kilometers of the coastline, definitely they can be impacted by the cyclones. 80% of the electricity poles were susceptible to high wind speeds because when cyclone comes, the wind speeds are high. They are susceptible for falling down. More than 75% of distribution lines were installed more than 30 years ago and do not have the capacity to withstand cyclonic winds. They cannot withstand. And, you know, the situation is likely to be similar in other coastal states of India, particularly the eastern coast, which is more susceptible to the cyclones. Western coast way, there are cyclones, but very less in number there. But on the eastern coast, most of the cyclones come and make the landfall. And the situation is similar in other coastal states as well. So this is something which needs to be understood. Now the MCQs. First is, which among the following are the principles of the Panchsheel of Buddhism? Peaceful coexistence, abstinence from theft, avoiding sexual misconduct. Only two, only one and two, only two and three are all of the above. Very carefully answer this question. Consider the statements and mark the correct one. By signing the Panchsheel agreement, India, for the very first time, recognized Tibet as part of China. The five principles of Panchsheel agreement became the core principles of the NAM. Only one, only two, both one and two, neither one nor two. Which among them is correct? Third is, which of the statements with respect to coalition for disaster resilient infrastructure are true? First, it is headquartered in India. Second, it is a financing agency for funding infrastructure projects with the aim of making them disaster resilient. Third, it was formed in COP 25 of UNFCCC in 2019. Only one and three, only one and two, all of the above. So you have to identify that. This is how many of the following infrastructure systems can be impacted due to extreme weather events. How many? Telecommunications, transportation, electricity transmission lines. Only one, only two. All of these can be impacted or none of them can be impacted. Carefully answer this. Fifth, consider the statements and mark the correct one. First, investments in early warning systems can reduce the overall expenditure to manage the disasters. Second, early warning systems have no connection with the fatality rate due to disasters. Only one, only two, both one and two, neither one nor two. So carefully answer these questions. I would be expecting the answers to these questions in the comment section. And now we move on to the MCQs of yesterday. I'll be discussing the answers. Which among the following dignitaries is above the leader of opposition in order of precedence? Chief Minister of State is at similar position. Union Cabinet Minister is at similar position. A judge of the Supreme Court is lower than the leader of opposition. The former president is the correct answer. The former president is at fifth or sixth position above the leader of opposition. The former president is. So B is the correct answer. Second, consider the statements and mark the correct one. Leader of opposition is a constitutional post and can be given to the leaders of the largest party in opposition in Lok Sabha, which is obviously wrong. It is not mentioned in the constitution. There is a law which was passed in the year 1977. The allowances and salaries of the leader of opposition in the Parliament Act 1977 it was. Leader of opposition post is exclusive for Lok Sabha. This statement is also wrong because there's a leader of opposition, separate leader of opposition for Lok Sabha, separate leader of opposition for Rajya Sabha. The presiding officers of both the house have to recognize them separately. So D is the correct answer for this. There is neither one nor. Third, consider the following privileges and mark how many of them are enjoyed by the leader of opposition. LOP is member of a high powered committee for appointment of the Lokpal. This statement is correct. Not only Lokpal, CEC, CIC, election commissioners, information commissioners, then the Central Vigilance Commissioner, the Director of CBI, all these crucial posts, this I would say LOP is a member of that committee for hiring that. LOP is member of a high-powered committee for removal of any judge of Supreme Court. This is not true. There's a proper procedure, impeachment procedure for the removal of judge of a Supreme Court. LOP escorts the speaker elect to the rostrum. This is true. So only two statements are correct out of these three statements. So B is the correct answer. Fourth, consider the following statements and mark the correct one. First is Chang'e is the first sample bringback mission of China from the moon. This statement is wrong. It is Chang'e 5, which brought samples back from the near part or near end of the moon. This is the first sample bringback mission which brought samples from the far end of the moon, far side of the moon. China is the only country to bring back samples from the far side of the moon. This statement is correct. So only 2 is the correct answer of this particular question. And the last question, consider the following statements with respect to sample bring back missions from moon and mark the correct one. USA became the first country. Yes, 1969 Apollo 11 mission of US. So this is correct. Chang'e 5 was China's first lunar sample bring back mission. Yes, it brought back samples from the near side. 2 kg of moon dust was brought by Chang'e 5. So, again, here the correct answer is C. Both the statements are correct. Now, with this, we come to an end of today's session. I will be seeing you tomorrow now with more such informative news pieces. Till then, you guys very well know what to do. I'm not repeating it today. Namaste. Jai Hind.